documents requested by the January 6th committee were recently received, but in not so good condition. So now they received these from the National Archives, which had received them from the Trump White House. So now the Washington Post is reporting that some of the records that the Trump administration, following his him leaving office, had sent over some records that were ripped apart and taped back together, according to three people familiar with those records. That's weird. That's very, very strange. Now, apparently, Donald Trump was known for basically taking stuff that he is supposed to keep, supposed to have filed for the National Archives. Instead, he's like, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Rips them up and then throws them around like confetti. Now, the Post explains that he left records management analysts scurrying around to scotch tape these records, these documents back together. So now, look, normally, again, this would be a ridiculous, fun story. However, there's potential legal problems behind doing this. The Presidential Records Act actually requires the preservation of memos, letters, notes, emails, faxes, and other written communications related to a president's official duties. And by the way, isn't it ironic that the same people that are like, we need to see Hillary's emails, right? We need the record of all the emails, is the same person that's taking their correspondence, and not in emails, of course, but just physical papers, and ripping them right up. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, obviously, Trump didn't give a goddamn and continued to rip up the documents and throw them around, throw them on the floor like a baby. And I'm not kidding either. That's what he would do. He'd just rip things up and let them float onto the floor. Absolute ridiculousness. Now, that said, a lot of them ended up in the National Archives to be turned over later on to the January 6th committee. So now the National Archives on Monday had taken the unusual step of confirming Trump's habit. I don't know why they're calling it a habit. It's not a habit. He's hiding evidence. I mean, how much more clear can you get? Yes, he's hiding evidence. Why? I don't know why. I mean, I can speculate why. But then he's not somebody that really makes a whole lot of sense. He's not a rational person. And so I can see him be like, I don't know, I'm just going to rip things up. Whatever. Don't care. Don't care. I'm going to rip them up. So now, as I said, the National Archives confirmed it, saying in a statement that, yes, records turned over from Trump included paper records that have been torn up. And some of them, by the way, were taped together. Others, not so much. In fact, some of the documents, they say, were not reconstructed at all. So what? They just, took, shoved them in a bag and then handed them over to the January 6th committee? I don't know. Well, first to the National Archives, and then the bag to the, to the January 6th committee. Here you go. What the hell is this? That's your records. Hey, don't blame us. We didn't shred them. Literally handing over confetti. My God. So now, some of the stuff that, some of the documents that we think might be involved in this, we don't necessarily know because you have to go through and basically now piece everything together, which I'd hate to be that guy. Honestly, I would hate to be that guy. But it's safe to assume that some of these documents might be things that Trump had tried to hide through executive privilege, and therefore, was unable, because he no longer has executive privilege, because he's no longer president. And so, I don't know, maybe that's why he shredded them. I have executive privilege. Oh, yeah, Here, take this. Here's my executive privilege. Whatever. I don't know. Maybe I could see that. I could definitely see that happening. I could definitely see that happening. Now, but by the way, that stuff that he tried to assert executive privilege on included diaries, schedules, appointment information, handwritten notes concerning January 6th from White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. That might be important. Speeches, remarks, and other things. So now look, even by the way, if there's nothing there, if they tape everything back together and find that there was nothing incriminating, which I find to be a laughable concept, but stay with me on this one, okay? Even if they don't find anything incriminating, well, it can still be problematic because what he did was illegal, or could be illegal. According to Stephen Gillerts, a New York University law professor and constitutional scholar, who said that White House documents torn up by Trump are clearly the property of the government under the Presidential Records Act. Quote, so destroying them could be a crime under several statutes that make it a crime to destroy government property if that was the intent of the defendant. A president does not own the records generated by his own administration. Okay. Now, whether anybody goes after him for that, for destroying the documents themselves, I don't know. That's an interesting question, not one that I'm really equipped to answer. But again, it really depends on what's in there and what the committee says and what they actually tried to do. Now, again, there is some things that I would be very interested in, and it appears the committee is also interested in. For example, 4 pages from the records of presidential findings concerning the security of the 2020 election. I think that would be very interesting. 4 pages of a draft executive order on the topic of election integrity. That's another thing. 3 pages of talking points on alleged election irregularities. And 2 pages of a draft text of a presidential speech for the January 6, 2021 Save America March, which ended up turning into the riot. These are documents that Trump probably didn't want anybody else to see. But again, if you don't have executive privilege, that's because you're not an executive anymore. And that means all that stuff, well, that's fair game. That's open.